We know the city of Buffalo has been working through a massive budget deficit. An Investigative Post is out now with new reporting that the acting mayor has been having discussions about selling Kleinhans Music Hall, perhaps to its main tenant, the Buffalo Philharmonic Orchestra. In addition to that, the Scanlon administration has been talking about trying to shift some maintenance costs to the county for some other city-owned venues, and that could include Shea's Buffalo Theater, which the city owns and leases out to the nonprofit that runs it. Late last year, the theater announced a multi-year $15 million expansion. Meantime, there have also been discussions about offloading maintenance costs for Salem Field, home of the Buffalo Bisons. Again, the city owns the baseball stadium, but it's operated by the team's owner, Bob Rich Jr. from Rich Products. Forbes says he's worth $7.1 billion. And similar story with the Buffalo Zoo, again owned by the city of Buffalo. The city comptroller said the majority of the $1.9 million in operating costs for cultural venues over the past decade has gone to the Buffalo Zoo. J. Dale Shoemaker with Investigative Post has been looking into all this, and I want to ask you about how you got this information. But let's start there with Kleinhans, because that's the one that's a little bit different than the others, right? The city looking at potentially selling Kleinhans.
Yeah, so specifically in the records we have, and the records that we have are Mayor Chris Scanlon's calendar. We got his daily calendar going back to when he first assumed office back in the fall. He had a meeting on February 11th specifically to, quote, privatize Kleinhans. That was one of the agenda items. Now, they don't have a specific plan to do this yet. There's not really a sale agreement or anything like this, but City Hall tells us that they are putting together a cabinet of people led by a fella at Rich Products, Jonathan Dandies, who's kind of a government relations guy. He's on a bunch of boards around town. He's going to be leading this cabinet to study this idea of offloading or selling some of these cultural venues. The
other venues I mentioned there, the Buffalo Zoo, Shea's, Salem Field, there are a couple of others as well. The History Museum, I think, is one of them. What would be the plan for those in trying to save some taxpayer money with costs associated to them?
Yeah, so I asked the city comptroller about this, and the cost that the city is spending on these buildings is not all that high. So over the last decade, the city has only spent $1.9 million on operating costs for these. That's just everyday, operations of these venues. And over the last decade, they've spent about $15 million on various capital projects. For example, they're paying to put a new roof on Kleinhans right now. So it's not insignificant amount of money, but it's also not astronomical costs either. We're talking in grand total like roughly $17 million over a decade the city has provided to these venues. So they're looking at offloading them. And this was revealed to us through, again, the mayor's calendars that we got through a Freedom of Information Law request. We did have to fight City Hall a little bit to get this information. I filed this request back in February. It was radio silence from City Hall until I pretty much said, hey, I'm going to write a story about you guys not answering this FOIL request. And then they finally said, okay, here are the records. And the records show us that this plan has been discussed on at least 2 occasions.
If this plan is going to work, if they're going to be able to offload at least some of these institutions or these facilities to Erie County, that would require the county going along with it. And I know you talked with the county executive about that.
Yeah, Erie County Executive Mark Poloncarz, he threw some cold water on this. He said, look, we already provide a lot of operating costs for these buildings. We're not looking to take on any more costs, and nobody's met with me about this. So this is something that's involved the Kleinhans leadership, acting Mayor Chris Scanlon and his top deputies, as well as a couple other people from the private sector, but it's not involved Erie County. So we'll see if that's even on the table.
In the few seconds that I have left here, I know you talked with a lot of people for this article, folks who run each of these different institutions. Do you get a sense that any of this is actually going to happen, or is it like when the budget deficit is this bad, maybe acting Mayor Chris Scanlon is saying, all right, we got to explore everything?
Well, he is definitely exploring all options, because one of the things he telegraphed in his State of the City address back in March was the hotel tax that he's proposed, the 3% hotel tax. He pitched that as a way of maintaining the capital and operating costs for these buildings. So if that plan goes through, which would require legislation in Albany, then perhaps this plan is moot. But that has not really gotten traction in Albany yet. So if that doesn't go anywhere, then maybe we are going to be looking at a more concrete plan to offload these properties.
Again, we're talking about Shea's, Salem Field, all of these important places that so many of us go to every single day. We shouldn't leave anyone with the impression that these places are going to be closed down or anything like that, right? This is just sort of trying to figure out who should own them, who should be paying for them.
Right. That's the end of the day here. Like, no one's closing the zoo, no one's closing the ballpark, but you might see, a shift to private ownership, which could lead to maybe less public access hypothetically in the future. Like right now, for example, there's things baked into the Kleinhans lease that allow school children to go to the to various performances for free. Same with there's a couple little sweethearts in there for the police union as well. They get some free tickets and some free tours. So things like that might go away if we do have private ownership of these places, but that's not happening just yet.
J. Dale Shoemaker with Investigative Post. Go to investigativepost.org and read the full article. I know you'll keep us updated as this develops. Thanks so much.
Absolutely.
Good to see you.